You're listening to the Platform Launchers podcast. I'm John Stange, and it's great to have you with us this week. This week, we're going to be talking about this idea of traditional jobs, which seems like a strange thing to talk about when we're talking about online platforms. But my premise this week, and we were just talking about this with the Members Club, they're live here on the call with me right now. We're going to be talking about it more with them in just a little bit. But my premise this week is this idea of encouraging us not to disparage the usefulness of our traditional jobs when we're trying to build our dream career or our online platforms. And I'll tell you what, as I interact with people at all stages of online platform development, from beginners who are just getting started to experts who have a highly developed online business, one theme seems to be common. Typically, when you're building an online platform, you're also thinking about the day when your business can replace your traditional job. Now, for many of us, that's the dream. And I believe it's more than possible for most of us to get there. But there are tools and opportunities we've been blessed with along the way that we shouldn't neglect and we shouldn't ignore. And one of the most obvious tools is the traditional job that I suspect some of us are dreaming about escaping. Now, let me give you a little background here in case you're not familiar with this about me or my life. I have a traditional job, and I'm not dreaming about escaping it. As I have done for the past 25 years, I serve as the pastor of a local church. I continue to serve in that role because I view it as a calling, not just an occupation. I am not serving in that role for money. In fact, our church leadership knows that paying me is optional. And as a nonprofit organization, there are seasons when our finances are good, and there's other seasons when our finances feel really tight. Several years ago, I was able to tell our treasurer that I would only accept a paycheck if all other bills, obligations, and salaries were paid first. So in other words, my reasoning for serving in my traditional job is not a financial reason. But let me tell you another story. It's a story about a good friend of mine. And I'm going to alter some of the identifying details of this story so that you won't be able to figure out exactly who I'm referring to. But my friend is a very talented artist, very talented speaker, writer, and coach. She is a joy to interact with, and I'm always impressed with the art that she creates, as well as seeing the heart that she has for serving other people. I feel like she does both very well. And she's in the process of trying to establish her online presence, but she feels stuck. And she hasn't been making the progress that she'd like to make. And at the same time, she's also attempting to fund her life through the sale of her art. So think about the dilemma that she's in, or the spot that she's in. People love what she's creating, but unfortunately, not enough people know about it yet. So it's not bringing in enough for her to earn a living. And she mentioned to me just the other day that now she's getting behind on her expenses. So we had a conversation recently where I encouraged her to consider a different approach. And maybe some of you that are either watching this via video or listening to this via the podcast, maybe some of you will identify with this. But I encouraged her to consider a different approach. And I think what I shared with her was somewhat surprising, because my advice to her was to seek a stable, predictable, traditional job that provided a regular source of income while she continues to build her online platform. And I know this surprised her because I speak so much about the benefits of earning a living through an online message-based business. Those that are in our members club can tell you I talk about this all the time. Those that were just at our recent live event, we spent the whole time talking about how to build an income through an online message-based business. But I'm speaking from experience when I share advice like this advice specifically, that a traditional job could be a benefit to us while we're building an online platform. And I reminded her that while I built my platform, so again, I didn't build my platform in a day. It took me years to build it to where it is right now. But I reminded her that while building it, I had a traditional job. I didn't leave my traditional job to build the platform. In fact, I actually had two jobs while building the platform. I was serving in my current role as a local church pastor, but I was also teaching classes at a local university. And I did both 4 years. And what that ended up doing was it helped give me a runway to cover my day-to-day expenses. so I didn't have to build my platform in desperation. Now, granted, there were seasons where my income from the church wasn't predictable. There were even seasons where the church couldn't pay me a salary, and then other seasons where things were tight and they were able to pay me a partial salary. They were usually able to pay me something, and then that gave me a runway to be able to do the things that I started working on doing. And so now, as I'm observing my friend who's attempting to build her platform, I'm convinced that a big reason she's feeling so stuck right now, and a big reason why she really isn't making the progress that she wants to make and not making it as fast as she would like to make it, it's because she's trying to rely on the income she's earning from a platform that's just starting out. It's in its infancy. Most online platforms don't generate the kind of income that you can live off of right when you're getting them off the ground. The same is true when you're thinking of most brick and mortar businesses. If you actually look at the income statements for most brick and mortar businesses, they'll tell you that it's usually a few years into the development of a traditional business before they become genuinely profitable. Sometimes that's the case with those of us that are building online platforms. They don't tend to become immediately profitable, or even if they are profitable, they don't tend to become income replacements immediately. That's rare if it happens immediately. It usually happens gradually. So if you've been thinking about building an online platform that becomes your dream career, let me encourage you to consider serving in a traditional job at the same time while you get your new thing off the ground. It doesn't have to be a permanent arrangement, but let me suggest a few reasons why you might want to consider this idea of a traditional job as at least a temporary option. So reason number one, why you might want to consider a traditional job as a temporary option. I think, first of all, I think you'll be more creative if you aren't stressing about living expenses. So when I'm trying to produce creative content, it's helpful to me if my mind is clear and I'm not feeling anxious about basic things. It's hard for me to be creative if I feel abnormally hungry. It's hard for me to think about building something when I'm worried about paying my bills or paying my rent or paying my mortgage, anything like that. But when my living expenses are covered and I have an emergency fund on top of that, my mind is much clearer and my creativity gets activated. I also have more energy for serving others when I'm not worried about my own needs being met. All right, a second reason to consider a traditional job while you're building your online platform is this. If you have a spouse, he or she will find it easier to support your dreams when the basics of home life aren't feeling neglected. Now, those of you that know me well know that I care more about the opinions of my wife and my children than I care about the opinions of anyone else on this planet. I want their support. I want them to be excited about what I'm involved in and what I'm working on. Throughout the course of my adult life, I have been blessed to have a very supportive wife. But there have been a few times where I'm sure it was very difficult for her to support some of my dreams while our financial margins at home were feeling tight. And I think she'd admit that it's much easier to support my ideas. It's much, much easier to support my ambitions when she doesn't have to worry if there's enough money in the budget to buy groceries. All right, a third reason why I think a traditional job could be useful is that you'll get more ideas while you're serving others than you'll get from sitting in isolation. Most people get new ideas when they're in motion, not when they're standing still. So if you're isolating yourself and if you're avoiding other people, I think you're going to find it difficult to come up with creative ideas. I think you'll even struggle to find inspiration. I'm convinced that we get some of our best ideas while we're serving other people, even when we're serving in ways that don't seem directly connected to what we're trying to build online. So you'll get more ideas while you're serving others than you'll get from sitting in isolation. All right, that was number 3. Here's number 4. For many of us, it's healthy to do more than one thing. I like variety in my daily activities. If I'm doing the same thing for too long, I eventually find it boring and I start to crave change. And I suspect many online entrepreneurs are wired quite similarly to me. And if that's the case, you might find it mentally, emotionally, and relationally healthy to be involved in doing more than one thing. A traditional job, even if it's part-time, it might help you find that kind of healthy variety. And here's number 5 on my list, why I think it's useful to consider maintaining a traditional job, at least in the early phases of developing your online platform. But that's this. This is number 5. I think you'll make poor choices and may even compromise your convictions if you put yourself in a place where you become desperate for money. People do strange things when they're desperate. I know some good people that I have seen make moral compromises in their lives when they became financially stressed. I have seen honest people act dishonestly. I've seen kind people become irrationally angry. I have seen gentle people become violent. I've even seen generous people become thieves. Don't put yourself in a place where you might be tempted to compromise your convictions because you're fearful you might not survive financially. Now, in some circles of entrepreneurship, and I operate in several of those circles, having a traditional job is treated like a badge of dishonor. And I'm not a big fan of that mindset because I don't think having a traditional job is dishonorable at all. I think it can be a wonderful thing depending on how you're wired and depending on what season of building your online platform you happen to be at. And depending on who you're talking to, you might even find that some people treat you like a failure if you're still working in a role that follows a more stable and predictable path. I would encourage you, if you're thinking about these things and if you're trying to build some online things, I would encourage you not to view traditional jobs like a failure because, in fact, they might be a gift. I think to many of us, they're a huge gift. They can be a very useful part in the overall financial recipe that we're trying to create and that we're trying to build. And for most of us, I think they will provide the financial margin that we need to get our online platforms built. You need some margin at times to be able to do this. And I think a traditional job can be a very useful part of our financial recipe and provide that margin that we need. Personally speaking, and I'll just end by saying this, personally speaking, I would rather build my platform from a place of delight than a place of desperation. So if you're thinking about building an online platform and you have a message that you want to share and you're focused on making things available to people that you know are going to be beneficial to them, and you're trying to get that out there and you think that eventually this could turn into something that becomes maybe what you do full time, I hope that you get there. And I think that most of you probably will, especially if you keep taking consistent action that's focused on meeting needs that people genuinely have. But again, personally speaking, like I just mentioned, I would rather build my platform from a place of delight than a place of desperation. So a traditional job can help give you that financial runway that you need while you build your online platform. Don't disparage it. It's not as much of a burden as some people treat it as. It's oftentimes quite a gift to be able to have that. And again, I maintain my traditional job. I feel like it's more of a calling than something I would necessarily just call a job. But at the same time, it's something that's important to me. And at this point now, I'm not even doing it for money. I'm doing it because I feel like this is what the Lord wants me to do during this season of my life. And I'd encourage you to just think about that from that deeper level. Don't disparage the opportunity that you've been given. A traditional job can be a very useful tool when you're trying to build your dream career through your online platform. A few quick things before we wrap up this week. Each week, I invite you to stop over to our website, platformlaunchers.com. When you're at the website, you'll see a bunch of things. You'll see our blog, so you can read up on all sorts of platform development topics. You will see our podcast, and you can go back and listen to past episodes. But one of the more generous things that we offer from Platform Launchers is the opportunity to just try everything out that we have going on online for a couple weeks for free. So we have all our training videos and courses and all sorts of content that you could check out at platformlaunchers.com, and you could check it out for free for a couple weeks and take a test drive and see if being part of our members club is something that would benefit you long term. And if you'd like to join us long term, and you're certainly welcome to do that, we'd love to have you do that. But in the meantime, test it out. You get 2 weeks for free. And if it's for you, we'd love to see you long term. And if it's not, we're happy to be able to serve you with that content. You got just so many videos, so many hours of videos just on all sorts of platform development topics that you could see in our training vault. You could also hear from all the guest experts that we've talked about and talked to. We've got a few new guest experts coming up very soon in just the next few weeks, and I'm really excited to introduce them to the group. But again, you can see all that at platformlaunchers.com. Give it a 2-week test drive, and we hope that we could help you as you're building your online platform. But that's it for us this week. Thanks again for tuning in. We're always grateful to have you with us, and we look forward to catching up with you again next time.